A shocking royal scandal is shaking the palace. A surrogate has come forward with explosive claims suggesting that Prince Harry might not be the biological father, leaving the public and royal watchers stunned. This revelation threatens to ignite one of the most controversial debates in modern royal history. In this exclusive report, we uncover the alleged evidence, the palace's silence, and the public's reaction to the bombshell claim. Could this scandal challenge the Sussexes' carefully built image, and what does it mean for the future of the monarchy? Tonight, the internet is on fire. A single claim, explosive, intimate, and aimed like an arrow at the heart of a family, ricochets across timelines and talk shows. Screens light up. Voices harden. The word bombshell gets thrown around like confetti. But beneath the noise is a quieter truth. We do not have proof. Not in court filings. Not in press briefings. Not in verifiable documents. Just a story racing ahead of the facts, daring the world to keep up or burn. You can feel the tension between silence and scream. The scream is the feed, caps-locked headlines, cropped screenshots, sources with no addresses. The silence is the institution. No comment, no correction, no counterpunch. And in the middle sits a family that built its modern identity on stepping out from behind the curtain, only to find the curtain thrown back against them. Here is what we can say. A claim surfaced online alleging surrogacy and questioning paternity. It hopped platforms, a whisper made louder each time it was repeated, reshaped, simplified. That's how rumors grow, not with evidence, but with retellings. Within hours, reaction videos multiplied, hashtags formed rivers, and commentators rushed to frame the narrative. Scandal, betrayal, cover-up. Yet when you peel away the commentary, there's a hollow center. No medical records. No corroborated testimony. No transparent chain of custody for any proof. Just heat without light. This is where responsible storytelling begins, with the boundaries. The law in the United Kingdom treats unverified allegations about private medical or parental matters as potentially defamatory, especially when children are involved. The ethics are even clearer than the law. 2 minors did not ask to be in your feed tonight. Their names trend anyway. Their photos are clipped and recaptioned. Their existence becomes a debating chamber for adults they've never met. Protect the children, a quiet voice urges. It should not be a controversial sentence. What about the palace? Silence is not just absence. Sometimes it is strategy. Institutions calculate risk. Comment, and you give a rumor oxygen. Ignore it, and you risk letting it calcify. The Sussexes have walked this tightrope before, correcting, refuting, litigating, and sometimes refusing to engage. The decision to say nothing is a decision to say something later if it becomes necessary. Or not at all. But let's talk about how we got here, not to validate the claim, but to understand its velocity. The modern monarchy is a paradox. It thrives on mystique, but survives by exposure. The couple at the center of this story chose a different path from the one expected. They stepped back, built a media company, told their side on their terms. Supporters called it brave. Critics called it brand management. Either way, when you become the narrator of your own saga, the audience expects a new chapter on demand. Tonight, the audience wants a reaction. A receipt. A confession. Something to either crucify or absolve. This is the playbook of the digital age. A fringe allegation launches. Aggregators harvest it. Headlines soften verbs claims, reportedly, allegedly enough to publish without owning the words. A pundit quotes a headline that quoted a post that quoted a whisper. Now it feels real because it is everywhere. But ubiquity is not the same as truth. If everyone is saying it, it must be true, the crowd insists. History disagrees. You want specifics. So do we. Where's the paper trail? Who are the named parties? Which outlet is willing to stake its reputation on the record? Where is the accreditation, the professional risk, the consequences for being wrong? Journalism, the real kind, is meticulous and slow. Rumors are frictionless and fast. Tonight is fast. Truth will be slow, if it comes at all. There is another layer to this. What it means for identity, lineage, and monarchy, the oldest storylines wrapped in modern packaging. The Crown is a story we tell ourselves about continuity, blood, and duty. Question the blood, and you question the story. That's why this allegation detonates so effectively online. It taps the primal nerve: who belongs, who inherits, who is real. But there's a difference between a narrative nerve and a verified fact. One can be inflamed without the other being satisfied. Let's talk crisis management. If you're the Sussex team tonight, you have 3 folders on your desk. Folder 1, ignore. Bet that the news cycle moves on and the rumor starves without fresh oxygen. Folder 2, refute. Issue a tight, lawyerly denial. Threaten action. Correct specific falsehoods. Folder 3, engage with values. Say little about the claim itself, a lot about privacy, children, and harm. Each folder has risks. Ignoring lets your critics define you. Refuting can elevate the rumor. Values messaging can read as evasive. There is no perfect move when the game itself is rigged toward outrage. Cameras pan to the commentariat. One voice says, where there's smoke, there's fire. Another replies, sometimes there's just smoke. A third says the quiet part out loud. It gets views. Cynical? Absolutely. Untrue? Not always. The creator economy rewards speed and certainty. Responsible speech requires caution and doubt. Guess which one pays faster? On nights like this, the timeline demands a verdict. But a verdict on what exactly? No court has decided anything. No record has been unsealed. No forensic report has been published. We're not even at the beginning of discovery. We're at the preface to speculation. And prefaces don't decide anything except whether you'll keep reading. There's also the human cost that algorithms don't price in. Grandparents seeing their grandchildren's names trend for reasons no child should ever encounter. Classmates stumbling on clips. A mother reading comments designed to wound. A father choosing whether to dignify a rumor or shield his family by staying still. We won't dignify every falsehood. You can imagine a spokesperson saying, "Our priority is the well-being of our children." That's not spin. That's a boundary. So where does that leave us? With simple, unglamorous categories. Things we know, things we don't, things we may never know. We know the claim exists. We know it has spread far beyond its original source. We know it implicates people's most private lives. We don't know whether any credible, verifiable evidence will ever surface, and until it does, this remains what it began as, a rumor. And we may never know more, because not every private matter belongs to public consumption, and not every question is ours to force. Here is the part many viewers won't like: patience. If you came for pitchforks, patience sounds like a dodge. If you came for truth, patience is the only road that touches it. If, tomorrow, a reputable outlet stakes its name on documented facts, you'll hear it here, with the receipts, with the context, with the caution it deserves. Until then, we do the thing that feels most countercultural online. We hold our fire. The narrative will try to pull you back into speculation, the suggestive headline, the knowing wink, the grainy leak. Resist the gravity. Ask who benefits from your outrage. Ask who pays the price for your curiosity. Ask whether sharing makes you part of the story or just a rerun of the same old cycle, rumor to reaction to revenue to regret. There is a final image I want to leave you with. Not a scandal montage. A closed door. A quiet room where 2 children are not trending, where bedtime stories happen without hashtags, where the adults flawed, famous, stubborn figure out how to move through a world that treats families like public property. This, too, is real. More real, perhaps, than anything you'll scroll past tonight. If these words stirred something in you, a frustration with the machine, a desire to wait for facts, a decision to stop rewarding rumor, say so below. Share this not because it's salacious, but because it isn't. Because silence can be strength and restraint can be a form of respect. We'll keep watching the story, not to feed the fire, but to make sure you get the truth when it exists to be told. Until then, hold the line. Protect the children. And let the noise pass without you. Here is what it would actually take to turn a rumor into reporting: names, documents, accountability, and consequence. Not a screenshot of a screenshot, not a watermarked collage, not an exclusive from a channel that has never once corrected itself. Real verification has edges you can cut your fingers on. It begins with a source who is willing to stand on the record, aware that lying carries legal penalties and reputational ruin. It continues with a chain of custody for any document or test, a timeline that survives cross-examination, and expert interpretation that can be challenged without crumbling. It ends with an editor who asks the only question that matters. If we publish and we are wrong, what happens to the people we just put on the line? You can almost hear the counterargument forming, but rumors have exposed real scandals before. That is true. Sometimes smoke does come from fire. But even the stories that began as whispers did not become history until the receipts were nailed down. The world remembers the revelation, not the careful months of verification behind it. There is a reason those months are invisible. Diligence rarely trends. Tonight is not diligence. Tonight is velocity. So we slow it down. We go frame by frame. First frame. A claim appears, tethered to no institution that will accept liability. Second frame. Amplification via creators who chase speed because attention is perishable. Third frame. News sites that borrow authority by using journalistic words without journalistic practices. Fourth frame. The feedback loop, where reaction becomes evidence for the next reaction. Fifth frame. The human beings at the center, forced to decide whether to dignify the cycle or let it spend itself. This is not unique to the monarchy. It is the weather system of the internet, a storm that forms over any name large enough to generate clicks. In that weather system, there are instruments the public rarely sees. Lawyers write letters that do not make headlines. Platforms quietly throttle certain keywords. Editors spike pieces that would have driven traffic but failed the sniff test. Publicists call off the record and ask for time. None of it feels cinematic, which is why the algorithm ignores it. But these are the brakes that keep rumor from graduating to accepted truth. The brakes don't squeal, they simply work. You might be wondering why surrogacy and paternity rumors, specifically, cut so deep. Because they're designed to puncture identity. They aren't about policy or performance, they're about who someone really is and whether a child belongs. In a monarchy, lineage is the oldest currency. But even in a republic of clicks, there is a cruelty to turning children into exhibits. This is why most ethical guidelines across serious newsrooms carry a simple rule: leave minors alone unless genuine public interest. Not mere curiosity demands otherwise. Public interest is not the same as what the public is interested in. That difference matters, and tonight, it is being flattened. Consider the silence from official channels, not as confession but as calculus. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play, especially when the rumor cannot be disproved without violating the very privacy you're trying to protect. How do you disprove an insinuation without dragging private medical records into public view? How do you end a whisper that shapeshifts every time it is cornered? There is a reason institutional voices default to principle in these moments. We do not comment on private family matters, particularly where children are concerned. Critics will call it evasive. Perhaps it is. It is also a line drawn around a bedroom door. If you're a viewer who wants to be responsible tonight, there is a practical checklist you can carry without turning yourself into a hall monitor. Ask what is being asserted and by whom. Ask who would bear the cost if the assertion is false. Ask whether the document on your screen would be admissible anywhere a judge wears a robe. Ask whether the outlet has ever corrected a major error and how loudly they did it. Ask whether the language does more work than the facts. Shocking, bombshell, stunning, a kind of verbal glitter designed to disguise a lack of substance. You don't need a press badge to read a sentence and know when it's leaning on adjectives because the nouns won't stand up. There is also the question of motive, which is the messiest part of any scandal-adjacent discourse. Not just the motives of the claimed source or the alleged subject, but the motives of everyone in the chain. Outrage sells. Vindication sells. Even skepticism can sell if packaged with enough swagger. But children do not consent to any of this, and the adults in their orbit are imperfect, protective, strategic, and sometimes contradictory. A father can be furious and silent at the same time. A mother can be defiant in public and exhausted in private. A palace can be opaque and still be acting within both law and conscience. Complexity doesn't excise accountability, it merely resists reduction. Let's talk about what genuine accountability would look like if this rumor were to migrate into the realm of legal action. Defamation suits do not thrive on vibes, they feed on specifics. A plaintiff must show a false statement presented as fact, published to others, that caused harm, with at least negligence as to its truth. When minors are involved, courts often move faster to protect their welfare, and judges are more receptive to injunctions that limit further spread of identifying material. It is not glamorous, this process. It is filing deadlines and discovery requests, sworn statements, and evidentiary fights. It is months of silence punctuated by single sentences that change everything. If that day comes, it will be obvious. Until then, legal thunder without lightning is just noise. Crisis communication in this space is also its own discipline. Most teams operate on a 3-lane road. One lane is legal, preserve rights, position for action, shut down the most egregious falsehoods. One lane is reputational, reaffirm values, remind the public of the work, center the children's welfare. One lane is strategic, decide when to engage, who should speak, and whether any engagement risks pouring accelerant on the rumor. The best teams understand that victory is not applause, it is the rumor dying of boredom because the audience moved on to something that can actually be proved. There's a practical reason to avoid turning speculative videos into a moral crusade against those who make them. It backfires. Call out a channel by name, and you confer status. Signal boost a thread, and you create new audiences for it. The best corrective is often to teach the audience how to think, not what to think. Not because truth is subjective, it isn't, but because a community trained to demand receipts is harder to manipulate the next time. Tonight's rumor will not be the last test of that muscle. You might have noticed how the conversation keeps trying to tug us back toward the palace gates, as if somewhere behind them sits a singular lever that, when pulled, will dump out a bucket marked truth. That lever does not exist. What exists are human beings with lawyers, communication staff, scheduling conflicts, relationships to repair, boundaries to hold, and children to tuck in. It is easier on nights like this to treat them as characters in a running show. The show feels like it belongs to us. The people do not. That's the tension that fuels entire industries, and it is why stories like this one regenerate in cycles. When you strip the rumor of its theatrics, you're left with a question that is both smaller and more profound. What do we owe strangers? The internet answers, nothing. The law answers, quite a bit. Ethics answers, more than you think, especially when they are children. None of these answers are as satisfying as lightning in a bottle. None of them trend as easily as a clip with a red circle and an arrow. But they're the spine of a society that does not treat people, even famous ones, as raw material. There is a quieter, braver path available to audiences and creators alike. It looks like waiting. It looks like choosing not to share. It looks like refusing to say a child's name in a sentence that invites speculation about their parentage. It looks like remembering, in the heat of a trending topic, that dignity is a form of truth-telling. You can be hungry for answers and still refuse to feed on rumor. You can be critical of institutions and still gentle with children. You can oppose a family's choices and still decline to wound the very people who cannot answer you back. If you came here hoping for confirmation, the most honest thing we can give you is the shape of responsible uncertainty. It is not indecision, it is discipline. It is the difference between asking hard questions and turning those questions into cudgels. Perhaps tomorrow will bring documentation, on-the-record statements, a courtroom timeline we can all see. Perhaps tomorrow will bring the same silence and the same noise. Either way, we will be here with the same stance, facts when we have them, caution when we don't, humanity always. And if you're still listening, if you stayed through the part where we refuse to feed the algorithm the thing it craves, you are the reason stories can be told differently. You are proof that an audience exists for patience, for care, for truth that walks instead of sprints. You are the oxygen for a better ecosystem than the one that tries to turn children into trends. If these words offered a steadier ground beneath the noise, say so below, and do it without naming minors or repeating unverified claims. Share what you expect from real journalism the next time a story like this surges. If, in the days ahead, verifiable facts emerge from credible, accountable sources, we'll be back, with context, with clarity, with the full weight of what can be known. Until then, let's choose the harder thing. Let's leave the closed door closed. Let's let the children remain just that, children. There is a habit online of confusing proximity with proof. Someone knows someone who heard from someone inside. The sentence grows muscles each time it's retold, and by the fifth retelling the rumor has acquired an aura, not of truth, but of inevitability. Watch the language closely when that happens. You'll see verbs go soft and nouns go vague. It's believed. People are saying. Insiders confirm. Which insiders? Confirm what, exactly? Believed by whom? Vagueness wears certainty's coat and hopes you won't check the label. Responsible storytelling takes that coat off and refuses to pretend it's a uniform. If you want to see how thin the scaffolding is tonight, follow the money. Outrage monetizes quickly. Responsible corrections, if they ever arrive, monetize poorly. There's a structural incentive to never slow down, never check, never pull a video because it might be wrong. The algorithm rewards the sprint and punishes the walk. But truth walks. It always has. An editor I admire says the hardest thing to teach new reporters is the quiet thrill of getting it right. That thrill doesn't trend. It should. We also need to talk about what proof would even mean in a case like this. People toss around the idea of tests as if such things simply drop from the ceiling on command. They do not. Ethical, legal, and human boundaries exist for a reason. Medical privacy is not a curtain you rip down to decorate a story. The families who live inside those walls are allowed to keep them up. That is not a conspiracy, it is civilization. Any demand that requires violating a child's privacy to satisfy an adult's curiosity is a demand we should all learn to reject. Part of the problem is that modern royal coverage is built to toggle between fairy tale and courtroom, and audiences have been trained to expect both on demand. When a wedding happens, the edit is soft focus and strings. When a rumor hits, the edit turns grayscale and percussive. Both are stories, painlessly consumed. But families are not content, and institutions are not Netflix arcs that resolve on cue. The truth, should it ever matter here, will arrive with less drama than you're being sold tonight. It will be a statement you can hold up to the light, an action with consequences, a document with names. Until then, we're just grading performances in a play that hasn't even been cast. There's another angle that deserves daylight: how easily speculation about parentage becomes a ritual of control. If you can convince enough people that a child's belonging is contingent on paperwork you haven't seen, on lineage you don't own, you've turned that child into a public referendum. It is not new. History is full of moments where crowds questioned who counts as family, who counts as legitimate, who counts at all. The internet simply does it faster and at louder volume. Progress looks like refusing to rehearse that script again. Imagine, for a moment, what choosing restraint might sound like in a space trained for escalation. A creator looks into the camera and says, "We don't have it. We don't have the receipts. We're sitting this one out." They lose a spike of views and gain, over time, a spine of trust. Viewers learn that no can be an answer, that not yet can be a promise. The ecosystem gains one more person who refuses to grab at children to feed adults. It is not glamorous. It is not viral. It is good. There is a world outside the storm, where phone batteries die and rumor cycles end, where a parent makes a snack while the kettle sings and no one writes think pieces about it. That world is the baseline. The fact that it feels radical to defend it tells you everything about the economy we've built around famous people's private lives. We let platforms convince us that every silence is suspicious and every boundary is an invitation to pry. It isn't. Sometimes the most honest sentence a public figure can offer is banal: "We won't be responding." The press release you dream up in your head doesn't become real just because you refresh the feed enough times. If verifiable facts appear, the conversation changes. You move from rumor triage to evidence analysis. You test claims against timelines. You ask experts who are willing to put their names beneath their words. You separate what can be known from what can only be guessed. You correct yourself loudly if you've been wrong. You leave the children out of your thumbnails and your keywords. That last part matters. Ethics that only apply when it's easy are not ethics, they're aesthetics. The monarchy, love it or loathe it, is durable because it has learned to let weather pass. Whole tempests have raged and faded while the institution stayed still. That stillness reads, to some, like arrogance. To others, like wisdom. Tonight, stillness looks like not pulling a private family into a public lab just to satisfy a rumor that cannot be satisfied without harm. There will be those who call that a dodge. They will be loud. They will be confident. They will not, in many cases, be accountable. There is a quieter chorus forming, and maybe you're part of it. It sounds like people who refuse to repeat a child's name in a sentence built to wound. It sounds like audiences who ask for receipts before they share. It sounds like creators who would rather be right than first. It sounds like a culture wondering if the cheap sugar high of scandal is worth the crash. We have trained our fingers to tap share before our minds have finished reading. We can untrain them. It will feel slow at first. Then it will feel like strength. If the story evolves, we'll be here, not to revel but to report. If it doesn't, we will let it remain what it is. A rumor that never graduated into fact. Choose, tonight, to be the person who breaks the chain, not by countershouting, but by refusing to pass along what cannot be carried without hurting those who didn't start it. The feed will try to convince you that your restraint doesn't matter. It does. It always has. It is how storms lose power. It is how families get to keep their doors closed. It is how truth, with its steady shoes, catches up to noise that sprinted itself breathless. There's a point in every rumor cycle where the loudest voices insist that silence equals guilt. It's tidy. It's satisfying. It's wrong. Silence can be a shield for the vulnerable, a pause to gather facts, a refusal to play by rules written to reward spectacle over truth. You know this instinctively in your own life. The internet just trains you to forget it. When things get loud, we mistake volume for validity. We mistake repetition for evidence. We mistake our hunger for answers for the existence of answers. The gap between those things is where harm happens. So here is the promise we can make on this channel when stories like this surge. We will not turn private children into public thumbnails. We will not launder speculation through weasel words and call it journalism. We will not use a question mark as a crowbar. If something is unverified, we will say so clearly and often. If something later proves false, we will correct it loudly and leave the correction up longer than the original clip. If we don't know, we will say we don't know. It is not glamorous. It is not viral. But it is the floor on which trust is built. There is another promise, too, and it's to you. We will teach the craft as we practice it. When verifiable information emerges, we'll show you how we verified it, who went on the record, what documents exist, what expertise we consulted, why a timeline holds up, why a quote means what it appears to mean. We'll separate what we infer from what we know and label both clearly. We'll show our math so you can check it. Not because you owe us your belief, but because belief earned is the only kind that lasts. And in the meantime, while the feeds try to bait you into taking a side on a question you cannot possibly answer without hurting people who did not ask for your attention, there are healthier choices at hand. You can step away for a night. You can refuse to share content that names minors. You can ask your favorite creators to stop playing roulette with children's privacy. You can decide that the dignity of strangers is a boundary you won't cross for an extra minute of outrage or a shot of novelty. Choosing not to click is not apathy. It is agency. People will tell you that scandals like this are inevitable, that fame is a contract signed with fine print you never see until it's too late. Maybe. But contracts can be renegotiated by cultures that grow up. We can decide that being interesting in public does not forfeit the right to keep your children's medical and family details private. We can decide that the price of a headline is not a childhood. We can decide that, even when we dislike the adults, we will not weaponize the kids. These are choices, not laws of nature. The algorithm is not a god, it is a mirror. We can train it to reflect something better. If you came here expecting fireworks, I know this feels like a long, stubborn match that refuses to light. That's intentional. We're not here to make rumor burn brighter. We're here to deprive it of oxygen until evidence exists or the spark dies out. The showmanship of scandal will always try to sell you an arc: accusation, outrage, revelation, downfall. It's neat. It's addictive. It's often fiction. Real life is messier and slower, and sometimes the most moral ending is no ending at all, just people going on with their lives behind a door you never open. Picture that door again. Not the palace gate. A regular door in a regular hallway, paint chipped at the handle where little hands have pushed it 1,000 times. On the other side, there's the hum of a bedtime routine, the shuffle of storybooks, the clatter of a toothbrush dropped in a cup, the soft negotiation over one more minute, please. None of that belongs to us. None of it should. The argument that celebrity erases those rights has only one beneficiary, and it is not the child. It is the machinery that profits from turning private moments into public property. If, in the days ahead, a credible outlet goes on the record with verifiable documentation and accountable sources, we'll be back, not with smirk or triumph, but with the quiet gravity such a shift would deserve. We'll scrutinize it. We'll test it. We'll invite experts who will put their names under their opinions. And we will hold ourselves to the same standard we ask of everyone else: receipts or restraint. Until then, we resist the dramatist's temptation to invent a third act just because the audience is restless. Maybe that sounds naive in a landscape where speed beats care 9 times out of 10. But all meaningful change starts as a minority position held with discipline. The audience that rewards patience grows one person at a time. The ecosystem reshapes itself one creator at a time. The rumor mills don't grind to a halt all at once. They lose torque when enough hands decide not to turn the wheel. You can be one of those hands. So can we. If you've stayed with us this far, you've already chosen a different path than the timeline. Thank you. Share this only if you share the values beneath it. Tell us, in the comments, what you expect from outlets when allegations like this circulate, not the gossip you want repeated, but the standards you want upheld. Tell us where your own lines are and how you hold them. Tell us what you do when a story tries to make you complicit in harming people you'll never meet. Then log off, if you can, and let the noise pass without you. We'll keep our watch. And we'll keep the door closed. Here's the part we rarely talk about on camera: what happens after the upload. The comments arrive in waves, some measured, many not. A few ask good faith questions. Others demand outcomes that only a court could produce. We'll moderate with a simple rule: criticize ideas, not people. Protect kids, always. If you post names of minors, speculative medical details, or doxing crumbs, it will be removed without debate. Not because we're protecting anyone's PR, but because we refuse to be the hallway where harm passes through on its way to someone's real life. If there's movement, you'll see it here in daylight. Movement looks like documents stamped with dates and names, sworn statements, filings that live on government servers, or on-the-record reporting from outlets that have paid a price for being wrong before and learned from it. Movement does not look like a recycled screenshot with fresh red arrows, or a voiceover that keeps changing the tense of the story to make it sound current. If we bring you an update, we'll show our work, where we got it, why we trust it, what we still don't know. Between now and then, the story will tempt you with story-shaped bait. It will dress conjecture in confessions clothes and dare you to tell the difference. You can. Ask yourself what would have to be true in sequence for the latest leak to be real. Who touched the information first? Who had motive to share it? What risk did they take by doing so? If the answers are all fog and vibes, you're looking at heat without light. Walk away. For those who feel disappointed that we didn't deliver a verdict, consider how many times the internet handed you certainty and then quietly took it back. The retractions never go viral. The corrections never get catchy thumbnails. But somebody pays for the rush, the people miscast as villains, the children turned into exhibits, the audience left a little more numb. If the price of being right is patience and the price of being wrong is somebody else's peace, the math isn't complicated. There is also a duty on us to resist the theater of balance that puts a rumor and a boundary on the same tier. One side says X, the other says privacy. That is not balance. That's a category error. A private family's refusal to parade intimate records is not equivalent to an influencer's appetite for content. We won't pretend those weights are equal on our scale just to look neutral. Neutrality without ethics is negligence in costume. If, at some point, legal action erupts around this rumor, our coverage will change tone by necessity. Courtrooms replace comment sections. Arguments get schedules. Claims meet consequences. We'll follow what is actually filed, not what is threatened in angry posts. We'll link to dockets, read the footnotes, ask people willing to sign their names to their expertise to explain what each step means. And we will live with ambiguity where the record is incomplete. That's adulthood. That's journalism. For creators watching this, here's a quiet challenge. Build the habit of not pressing publish when minors sit at the center of uncertainty. Your analytics will survive. Your integrity will grow. Your audience will notice who treats their attention as a trust rather than a slot machine. You might lose velocity. You'll gain gravity. In a landscape of sprinting takes, gravity wins in the long run. For viewers, the challenge is simpler and harder. Starve the beast that feeds on children's privacy. Don't click the thumbnails that turn a family into a guessing game. Don't share the clip that names kids to punish their parents. Don't reward channels that swap receipts for rhetoric. Every time you decline the easy hit, the market gets a little less cruel. It won't announce the change. You'll feel it anyway. So we end where we began, with the difference between silence and scream. The scream will keep trying to draft you into its chorus. Let it pass. The silence we choose tonight is not surrender, it is stewardship. It is the decision to value real lives over tidy plots, to keep the door closed that never should have been forced open, to wait for the steady shoes of truth instead of chasing the flash of rumor sprinting nowhere. If and when the facts arrive, we'll be here, with receipts, with context, with care. Until then, take your curiosity and point it somewhere that doesn't require stepping over a child's name. Step outside the storm for a while. Let the feed refresh without you. Somewhere, a bedtime story is ending with the line every family deserves more often. It's okay, you're safe, good night. There's one more layer we need to put on the record before we close the book for tonight. How a rumor like this rewires your brain while you're scrolling. You think you're just collecting facts, but the feed is quietly doing surgery on your instincts. It teaches you that speed is virtue, that outrage is wisdom, that suspicion is sophistication. It tells you the crueler comment wins because it rings louder in your chest. The antidote isn't to shut your eyes, it's to recover your senses. Notice how your breathing changes while you read. Notice your shoulders creeping up toward your ears. That is not enlightenment. That is adrenaline. Adrenaline makes terrible editorial decisions. If you slow the tape, you'll see the trick, the way a headline leans on your pre-existing feelings and invites you to confuse familiarity with evidence. It shows you a collage of moments you half remember and asks you to make the leap. It flatters your skepticism by offering you a theory that needs zero receipts because it fits. This is how conspiracies recruit careful people, not by persuading them to be gullible, but by persuading them that they're finally seeing what others refuse to see. The fix is boring and therefore powerful. Demand the receipts anyway. There's dignity in boredom when the alternative is harm. Real verification is paperwork. Real reporting is unsexy hours. Real accountability is an update that lands 3 days late because someone insisted on the extra call, the missing document, the quote we couldn't get on the record. Audiences don't always reward that. Algorithms almost never do. But the people in the blast radius will feel the difference, and that has to matter more than our dopamine. If the palace speaks, we will play it straight. If counsel files, we will read it soberly. If a reputable outlet publishes a piece with names and documents, we will not perform shock at information we've been telling you to wait for. We will interpret with the same discipline we practiced in the dark. No theatrics, no children used as props, no victory laps. There are no winners in stories that pass through kids. There are only degrees of damage and degrees of care. Between now and whatever comes next, practice the tiny refusals that build a healthier feed. Refuse to quote a child's name for engagement. Refuse to frame privacy as guilt. Refuse to elevate creators who trade in insinuation and then hide behind the word allegedly like it's body armor. You are not powerless in this economy, you are the currency. Spend yourself on outlets that spend themselves on truth. And remember the difference between curiosity and entitlement. Curiosity asks, what happened? Entitlement insists, show me now. Curiosity can wait, entitlement breaks locks. Curiosity honors boundaries. Entitlement tramples them and calls it transparency. Curiosity keeps faith with the idea that some doors stay closed without anyone hiding a monster behind them. Tonight, for the sake of two children who did not build the stage we all stand on, choose curiosity and leave entitlement hungry. If you've been with us through this whole run, here's the ending we promised from the beginning, a closing benediction without a verdict. We're not going to invent a third act because the timeline demands catharsis. We're going to do the unfashionable thing and stop where the facts stop. That's not a failure of storytelling, it's the point of it. Stories that know where to end are stronger than the ones that run until they crash. When the cameras go off, we'll keep our watch, quietly checking the filings, checking the statements, checking the sources who put their names under their words. If the ground shifts, we'll return with steady shoes and receipts you can hold. If it doesn't, we'll let the rumor die of neglect here, in a corner of the internet that prefers the weight of truth to the rush of noise. If this studied you, say so below without repeating the claim or naming minors. Tell us the standards you want us and every creator you watch to keep when a story tries to conscript your attention with a child's face. Tell us where your lines are and how you hold them. And then, even if just for tonight, log off, pour a glass of water, stand by a window, breathe until your pulse forgets the algorithm. Somewhere, a light is switching off in a child's room. Somewhere, the noise is far away. Somewhere, the only headline that matters is simple. It's okay, you're safe, good night. By morning, the rush will have cooled into envy. That's when real work happens. We'll check the registries that actually matter, not the screenshots that want to. We'll read statements twice, first for what they say, then for what they avoid saying. We'll call people who put their names beneath their words and ask them the annoying questions that make good stories sturdier and bad stories collapse. If nothing changes, you'll hear nothing from us. Silence, in that case, isn't coyness, it's the absence of news dressed up as news. If something does move, you'll recognize it by its weight. Documents with dates and signatures read differently than captions with heat and haze. Sworn statements have texture. They include time, place, consequence. Court filings have geography. You can point to where they live. Official letters from counsel have authors who answer the phone. Reputable outlets anchor claims to named reporters and standards editors. They'll tell you what they couldn't confirm as loudly as what they could. This is the difference between a rumor wearing a uniform and the uniform itself. There's also an ethical line we will not cross, even if others sprint past it. The curiosity of adults never outweighs the privacy of children. That sentence holds even when you dislike the adults. It holds especially then. We won't build thumbnails from childhood. We won't platform analysis that reverse engineers family photos to insinuate private medical facts. We won't be the place where a boundary is turned into a spectacle. If you came here for a verdict that tramples that line, you'll leave disappointed, and that is a feature, not a bug. Part of why this rumor bites so hard is because it pretends to be about truth while actually being about control. Question someone's parentage and you're not just poking their story, you're trying to seize it. You're telling a family that belonging is provisional, that the crowd can vote it up or down. It's an old tactic with a new interface, and it thrives in economies where attention is a currency and children are treated like collateral. We don't pay with that coin. You'll hear people argue that public interest demands answers. Be careful with that phrase. Public interest is not whatever wins the race to trend. It's a narrow, disciplined idea, information that meaningfully affects the rights, safety, or democratic oversight of the public. Turning private medical or parental matters into click fodder for sport doesn't meet that standard. The test for whether something is genuinely in the public interest is simple and uncomfortable. Would a judge, not just a comment section, agree? If you're feeling whiplash from the cycle, try this small recalibration the next time a leak lands on your screen. Ask whether the new claim reduces uncertainty or manufactures more of it. Truth pays off its debts. It closes loops, tightens timelines, clarifies stakes. Rumor prints fresh IOUs. It adds maybes, piles on hypotheticals, multiplies routes for the story to escape accountability. One path narrows, the other sprawls. Choose the narrowing path. We also owe you transparency about our own incentives. Outrage would be easier. Shocking thumbnails move faster than careful sentences. But speed without spine is just choreography. Our bargain with you is different. We'll trade some clicks now for credibility later. When facts arrive, if they arrive, you won't have to unlearn anything we taught you tonight. That's the quiet dividend of restraint. There's a practical invitation here for creators who are watching. Build your channel on receipts and mercy. Receipts mean you can stand your ground when the wind shifts. Mercy means you don't put kids in the line of fire to get there. It will cost you in the short term. It will return compound interest in the long term, paid in trust you can't fake and an audience that doesn't flinch when you ask them to wait. In a market saturated with volume, gravity is a differentiator. And for viewers, the invitation is gentler but no less crucial. Practice the dignified no to sharing a clip that names minors. No to rewarding insinuation wrapped in the word allegedly. No to creators who mistake proximity for proof and certainty for courage. Each no is a tiny act of culture making. Enough of them add up to a feed that feels less like a battleground and more like a commons. If the palace speaks, we'll cover it with cold light. If legal filings appear, we'll read them line by line and tell you what they do and don't settle. If a reputable newsroom goes on the record with documents and accountable sources, we'll bring you the story with the same discipline we practiced in the dark. Until then, we will not pretend to know what we do not know, and we will not wound the people we cannot help. We'll close, not with a twist, but with a boundary. Some doors stay closed because that is where children sleep. The internet will try to convince you that you're entitled to every room in every house that has ever appeared on your screen. You aren't. None of us are. The strongest thing we can do together tonight is choose to walk past a door that isn't ours and let the quiet on the other side remain intact. If this studied your pulse, tell us how you want this corner of the internet to behave when the next rumor comes for the next family. Tell us the standards you expect, not the salacious detail you crave. Then take your attention, the most powerful tool you own, and spend it on something that doesn't ask you to step over a child's name to get your fix. Somewhere, a light clicks off and a room goes still. Let's not trespass there. Here's what tomorrow looks like if we choose care over spectacle. The feed's calm. The thumbnails pivot to something else. The rumor, starved of our clicks, shrinks from a bonfire to a stubborn ember. In that quieter light, patterns appear that were invisible at midnight. You see how the story tried to conscript you, how it dressed up your curiosity as entitlement, how it put a child's name on the table and called it conversation. You also see the door we left closed and realize nothing terrible happened because we respected it. The world did not end. It got a little kinder. And then, because life goes on, ordinary events start to reclaim the timeline. A charity project launches, a podcast episode drops, a school day ends with a crayon drawing taped to a fridge. These are the untrending truths that rumors pretend to replace. They never can. Even the monarchy, built on spectacle, is mostly logistics and naps and calendars and meetings you'll never watch. The internet teaches you to live at the extremes. Real life lives in the middle. If you still feel the itch for resolution, notice what that itch really wants. A feeling, not a fact. Rumor offers feelings fast and facts slowly, if at all. So we trade the cheap rush for the long payoff, the trust you won't have to unlearn later. You may not remember this video in a week, but you will remember how it made you feel, less hijacked, more grounded, a little more in charge of your attention. That's the point. Attention is power. Keep it, or someone else will spend it for you. There's a practical exercise you can carry into the next storm. When a claim appears, write down physically, if you can, what would count as proof, who would need to say it, where it would need to be filed, and what the consequences would be for lying. If what you're shown doesn't meet that bar, don't move the bar. Keep it where it is. Watching your own standards hold is its own kind of steadiness, a ballast against the tide. Creators, if you're still here, consider this your quiet manifesto. We will be the ones who don't cash children in for clicks. We will be the ones who'd rather be late and right than early and wrong. We will be the ones who correct loudly and leave the correction up when it costs us. We will be the ones who call public interest what it actually is, not what the algorithm wants it to be. It won't get us a headline. It'll get us a spine. And to the families who live inside these storms, royal or not, here's what we can say from outside the gates. We won't pretend to own your story just because we can see your house from the road. We won't force you to prove private things to satisfy public appetite. We won't confuse your silence with guilt when it might be a simple, necessary mercy for your kids. The line we draw is simple enough for a child to understand. People are not content, and children are never props. So we close the way we began on the difference between the scream and the silence. The scream will always find a new headline. It's a creature of appetite. The silence we practice tonight is a creature of principle. One burns out. The other endures. If tomorrow brings documents, names, and accountable reporting, we'll come back with steady shoes and show you the receipts. If tomorrow brings more smoke without flame, we'll let the wind take it. Either way, we refuse to become the hallway rumor must pass through to reach a child. If this gave you steadier footing, tell us, without naming minors, without repeating claims, what standards you want enforced when the next surge comes. Tell us where you draw your own line and how you keep it. Then, because a life is waiting off-screen, do something small and human that no algorithm can monetize. Text someone kindly, make tea, step outside, and count 3 quiet breaths. Somewhere, a lamp is dimming in a room where the door is still closed. Let it stay that way. Here's the part where we get specific about craft, because craft is how you keep your integrity when the wind howls. Imagine the strongest version of this rumor arriving on your desk tomorrow. Not a screenshot. Not a collage. A person with a name, a lawyer, and a claim. You don't rush to upload. You open a notebook and begin a slow audit of everything that must be true for their story to stand. Dates have to line up with calendars. Places have to map to real addresses. Travel records have to make sense. Every name they give you becomes a phone call. Every document becomes a provenance check. You're not looking for a way to publish. You're giving the claim a fair chance to break under its own weight. If it survives that pressure, maybe it deserves daylight. If it doesn't, you don't get to pretend the cracks are character. There is a second notebook for motive. Not because motive proves or disproves a claim, but because it colors the risk. Are they seeking money? Revenge? Attention? Whistleblowing? People are rarely pure in the reasons they come forward. That's human. What matters is whether the evidence stands without the scaffolding of their feelings. A true thing doesn't need a perfect messenger. A false thing can arrive with a halo and still be false. You separate the person from the proof to protect both the audience and, ironically, the source. If you publish a story that can't stand, you don't just hurt your viewers, you ruin the person who trusted you too. When children sit at the center, the lens gets smaller on purpose. You redact what you can, blur what you must, and leave out what adds heat without adding clarity. That isn't protecting powerful adults, it's protecting powerless minors from the ricochet. Audiences sometimes mistake restraint for bias. Let them. The bias here is toward minimizing harm to those who did not choose the spotlight. We can live with that charge. If the institution speaks, read the words like a lawyer and like a parent. Institutions rarely lie outright, they shape. They prefer absolutes when they have them and principles when they don't. We categorically deny is different from we will not comment. We will pursue legal options is different from our attorneys have filed. Precision matters. So does context. A palace, a production company, a news outlet, each has a different threshold for engagement. You learn their patterns so you don't confuse strategy with confession. There's a truth about platforms that creators whisper to each other off camera. Outrage retains better than nuance in the short term and worse in the long term. Channels built on combustion burn hot and then out. Channels built on receipts and mercy accrete something slower and sturdier. The audience that stays with you through "we don't know yet" is the audience that trusts you when you say "we do." That trust is the only hedge against a future where a genuinely urgent story needs your viewers to believe you quickly. Every time you refuse to sprint without shoes, you are banking credibility you will one day need. You might ask, isn't there a middle path? Cover the rumor responsibly, keep the traffic, and wait to adjust if the facts change? That middle path is a mirage. The minute you package a child's privacy as content, you've already crossed the line. The minute you treat an unverified allegation like an entertainment arc, you've already trained your audience to expect the next installment, proof or no proof. Better to lose a spike than to lose your compass. Better to make fewer videos than to spend the next year making apologies. There's also the quiet work of repair when you get something wrong. Not if, when. You will mishear. You will misread. You will misjudge a source who seemed solid and turned to sand. The repair looks like a standalone correction with the same energy as the original. It looks like pinning the fix, not burying it. It looks like reaching out to those affected and asking what accountability would actually help, not what optics would look best. It looks like living with the bruise and choosing to be grateful for it because a bruise is proof you still feel. For viewers, the same ethic scales down. When something grabs you by the collar, pause and write down what you would accept as proof before you read another word. Decide, in calm, what would be enough. Then refuse to move the goalposts later because the rumor gave you a feeling you liked. If the bar isn't met, you set your phone down and let the heat roll past you. This is not cynicism. It's discipline. It frees your empathy for the stories that deserve it. None of this is glamorous. It is a kettle left to boil while you check a date in an old interview. It is a DM to an expert who will take 2 days to reply because they're doing their actual job. It is 3 drafts of a sentence that says less but harms less. And it is the moment, right before you export, when you hear your own voice in your head asking, if we're wrong, who pays? If the answer is children, you already know what to do. So here's our standing offer for this story and the next. When there is news, not noise, we'll be here with shoes built for the ground we're walking. We'll show you what moved, who said it, where it lives, how we tested it, and what we still don't know. We'll keep the door closed that should stay closed. We'll let silence do its quiet work where silence is the only ethical choice. And we will keep asking the question that turns a feed back into a community. How do we tell the truth without breaking the people inside it? If you want more, tell us what careful coverage looks like to you when a rumor has children in its blast radius, without naming minors, without repeating claims. If you're ready to leave the storm for tonight, take that as a win. Somewhere a routine is unfolding that will never trend. A lamp dimming, a plate in the sink, a line from a storybook. We don't need to see it to know it's real. We just need to let it be. Before we close the tab on tonight, let's run a final drill, the kind producers keep taped to the side of a monitor for nights exactly like this. You build a clean timeline on paper, not in your head. Day, time, source, document, action. Then you take a red pen and strike anything that can't be located in the world, a docket number you can't pull, a statement that lives only in a cropped screenshot, a source that evaporates when asked to go on the record. What remains is smaller than the rumor felt. That's the point. Truth is usually smaller than spectacle. It's also stronger. Then you audit language. Replace every reportedly with the name of the reporter. Swap every sources say with the number of sources and their proximity to the claim. If the sentence breaks, it wasn't a sentence, just a mood in a trench coat. This is the unglamorous work the audience never sees, the quiet carpentry that keeps roofs from collapsing when the next storm rolls in. Do it enough times and a strange thing happens. Your scripts get calmer. Your viewers do too. There's a postscript to all of this that doesn't fit in thumbnails. Repair. When a rumor dies of neglect, it leaves behind people who still got scraped by it. Not just the family at the center, but the audience conscripted into suspicion and the creators who sprinted and now feel hollow. Repair looks like a channel that circles back, not to gloat, not to dunk, but to say, we waited, nothing credible emerged, we're letting it go, and then to model how letting go sounds. No winks, no victory laps. Just a small act of cultural hygiene in a medium that rarely brushes its teeth. If tomorrow brings motion, we'll step toward it like adults. Daylight first. No dramatics. No children in the frame. We'll show you the spine. The named source, the document's path, the expert who will sign their analysis. We'll lay out what's still unknown and let unanswered questions remain unanswered instead of stuffing them with speculation to make the edit feel full. That's how you keep your compass when the view gets foggy. You don't invent mountains. You wait for the fog to lift. And if tomorrow brings more of the same, more smoke machines, more just asking questions, more bait disguised as updates, we'll let it pass without enlistment. Not because we're timid. Because we're tired of being told that curiosity and cruelty are cousins. They aren't. One is a muscle you build with patience. The other is a shortcut you take when patience feels like poverty. We can afford patience. We choose to. There's a human scale to all of this we keep returning to because it's the only one that matters. A door. A lamp. 2 kids who didn't pick the stage. Adults who did, and who will be argued about for as long as there are timelines to fill. Fine. Argue about the adults. Debate the institution. Analyze the comms. But leave the children out of the calculus you do to make your take feel complete. Whichever side of any royal or political aisle you're on, this is a line that can be held without cost to your principles and with great benefit to your humanity. Maybe you're a creator watching, tempted to test the line with clever hedges, question marks, allegedly passive voice. You don't need the crutches. Build the muscle instead. Keep a little card near your keyboard, receipts or restraint. It will save you from small, easy betrayals of your future self. It will also make your yets louder when you finally have the story that deserves to be told in full light. Maybe you're just a person with a phone and a feed, and your power feels small. It isn't. You're the market. When you scroll past a thumbnail that uses a child to punish an adult, you are voting. When you refuse a link that mistakes proximity for proof, you are funding a different future. When you comment to ask for sources instead of spiking the outrage with jokes, you are modeling a norm that travels farther than you think. A culture is 1,000 small choices made on ordinary days. This is one of them. So we land, not with a twist, but with a practice. Tonight, we did not feed an allegation that relies on violating children to feel complete. We insisted on a standard that can outlast 1,000 trend cycles. We chose the steady shoes over the sprint. If the ground shifts, we'll return with the appropriate weight.